Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is my June wrap-up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books, and today we're going to be talking all about all of the books that I read in June. And not only that, but we will have the long-awaited update on my giant TBR and what the numbers are like after doing some unhauling, some reading, and then some hauling in June. As normal with my wrap-ups, I will give you a few stats first, and then I've got a couple of books I haven't quite finished yet, so I'll tell you about those. And then we go on to the books, and I will be talking about them roughly in the order that I enjoyed them, with one exception this month, which I'll talk about in a moment. First of all, in the month of June, I did manage to read 10 books. One of those was an audiobook. This is quite a small amount of audiobooks for me for a month, but this is because I spent most of the month listening to an audiobook which I have not quite managed to finish within the month, which is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I'm really enjoying reading Project Hail Mary, but I haven't quite finished yet. I've got about 2 hours left. That's why only one audiobook in June. So yes, 10 books. I'm also going to be continuing into July. Six Tudor Queens, Katherine of Aragon, The True Queen by Alison Weir. Didn't quite manage to finish this by the end of June. I am into part 3 and I've got a couple of 100 pages to go still. I'm reading this for the Tudoralong, so I am hoping to go on to the Anne Boleyn book this month. The Tudoralong is hosted by Gemma at Gemma Books, Emily at Novell Novels, and Dani at Dani's Book World, so do get in touch with one of those ladies who I will link in the comments down below if you would like to join in with Anne Boleyn this month. So that's still on the go. You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned that something else is still on the go, and this is the first time this has ever happened in a year, because I have an announcement to make today. I have finished Don Quixote. It's over. I finished it. I talked in my mid-month update about how I wanted to try really hard to finish it, and that it would undoubtedly mean I read fewer books. I ended up at a point where I actually decided to only read this, so I had nothing else going on at the same time. I didn't allow myself to pick up any more books, only this. So it was quite an intense time of reading Don Quixote, but I have finished this book. This is now the longest book that I have ever read. And it's also the longest it's ever taken me to read a book, which is a year and a month. It took a long time. I am glad I've read this. It was a good book, and I would recommend it to people who want to read one of the very first ever novels and want to find out about a crazy man who thinks he is a knight errant after reading many stories about chivalry. And the best thing about this book by far is the relationship between Don Quixote and his squire Sancho Panza, and their back and forth kept me going through this book. It really did. The book is very episodic. Chapters are often unrelated to further chapters, really, so you can read this in a very dipping in and out of way, which has definitely contributed to it taking me a year and a month. But yeah, don't be put off by it taking me a year and a month. It is very funny. I enjoyed this translation. It certainly had its moments of making me smile. I do think that when a lot of people think of Don Quixote, they think of Don Quixote like thinking he's a knight and charging at windmills, jousting with windmills. I think that's the famous image of Don Quixote. And I must say that that is one of the very first things that happen in this book. So if you're going into the book for the windmills, you'll find them very early on. I actually thought that part 2 in places was slower than part 1. Some interesting things do happen in part 2 though. And Where part 1 quite often went off on a tangent, somebody would arrive and tell you their entire life story for a chapter or 2. Part 2 tried very hard not to do that, and I think that's because originally this was published in 2 separate parts, and part 2 is quite meta because it refers to the first part of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza's adventures have been published in that part, so it is a bit meta. If you're interested in Don Quixote, definitely give it a try and don't be put off by my epic quest to read it. I'm sure it's taken me 10 times as long as it takes most people, because it is actually, for its age, a very, very readable book. So this could be the last time I talk about Don Quixote on my channel, but fear not, you would have seen in my book haul video that I have a new project with a very large book, and I'm going to be reading The Count of Monte Cristo with Gemma and Fraser starting in August. So we may be in for a whole new saga of Will It Take Me a Year again? Hopefully it won't, because I think we're intending to make the buddy read a couple of months long, not a year. So it's goodbye to Don Quixote. Very, very glad I finished it. And yay, it's done. So I have read the most intimidating book on my bookshelf as of last year. I now have a new most intimidating book on my bookshelf. Let's pop Don there. I would actually rate Don Quixote probably overall a low 4 stars. I would rate him in my very good category, because I think that you can see a lot in it about how it has paved the way for this sort of format of book. I do think it could be shorter, definitely could be shorter, but I'm still going to allow it to be very good. But it definitely wasn't a favourite of any of the months that I have read it. As you know, I do not really DNF books, but in the month of June I actually DNF'd 2 books, progress, and now I've done that I feel like I probably will DNF more, because I just feel like there's too many things to read to waste your time on a book that you're not enjoying. So if you've watched my chat with Gemma, a Gem of Books, about the Women's Prize for Fiction and our predictions for that, then you will know that I actually DNF'd a book that was shortlisted for the Women's Prize, and that was The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get on with this book. I really did give it a very good go, and I reached 51% on this book. To start with, I had out the ebook on the Libby app. After a short while of reading that, I decided to switch to the audio. So I bought the audiobook, and I actually disliked the audiobook so much that I returned the audiobook, which I've never ever done before, because it just hadn't chosen voices that matched the narrative voice for me. Apologies if you have really enjoyed the audiobook of this, but I did not. I returned that, I went back to the ebook, and I did read 51%, but I just couldn't read anymore. I was trying really, really hard to care about the main storyline, because this book is kind of set over 2 timelines. We have a storyline with, I believe she was called Ada, in the present day, living with her dad, and her mother has passed away and her aunt has come to stay with them. And I believe that storyline was going to be about her finding out more about her heritage, because she is the daughter of, I believe, a Greek Cypriot and a Turkish Cypriot, and they have both left the island of Cyprus, and they brought with them a fig tree, and the fig tree was a narrator in this as well. And this is where the book went quite wrong for me. So the past timeline seemed to be about the mother and father and their sort of star-crossed lovers type thing. I think I probably could have read more of this book if it wasn't for the fig tree, because I like the idea of a fig tree as a narrator. It's fine. There was some nice stuff about nature in it from the fig tree, but then I just felt like the fig tree was spouting endless cliches at me, and I couldn't deal with it. And I felt like I didn't care about anyone in the book enough to carry on dealing with it. The only person I did care about in the book remotely was Ada, the young girl in the present day, but I just couldn't read any more Fig Tree, unfortunately, so I abandoned that. It's my first DNF in many years. Secondly, I also DNF'd towards the end of the month The Life of the Mind by Christine Smallwood. This is another book that was on my sort of project that I've been doing. Basically, this book was about a woman who has just had a miscarriage. She didn't really seem to care about that, other than the fact that she was telling us quite a lot about her bodily functions, both around the miscarriage and not. So I would say massive trigger warnings for this book for a lot of people, I should imagine. My two problems were, one, again I got to 50% on this. One, I couldn't deal any longer with the just graphic descriptions of bodily functions, and two, I can't imagine that many people would actually care about this character. She was horrible. So I think her name was Dorothy. She just didn't come across as a good person, as a nice person in any way. There was nothing at all to tie me to the story. There didn't really appear to be a story, to be honest. It just seemed to be about Dorothy and the fact that she had two therapists, and the fact that she didn't really seem to care about her relationship or what had happened to her. No, no. It wasn't even like it was in first person and was an actual definite stream of consciousness, but it was like a third person stream of consciousness, if that makes any sense. I haven't actually heard of anybody talking about this book, but obviously I did find it on this list that I'm reading from. So I had a look on Goodreads to see if there's any development to the plot, and apparently it just went on in the same way, so wasn't interested in finishing that. If you have read either of these books and love them, and I know the first one's very controversial because I know lots of people loved that Fig Tree, do feel free to let me know in the comments whether I should have carried on with them. I don't think I will go back to either. So moving on into the rest of the books that I read. I read quite a range of books this month, and they're going to be ranging from books that were okay right up to my favourites of the month. So let's get going. The first one was an audiobook, my only audiobook of the month, and that was The Widow by Fiona Barton. I've already spoken about this one. I didn't enjoy it. I read it for the Killer Reads Thriller Month book club run by AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, and this was definitely my least favourite that we've read in that book club, and I don't think it hit the mark as a thriller at all. So if you want to see more of a rant about that one, check out my mid-June update. So let's move on to good books. This one just about scrapes into a good book, and it's a book I was really disappointed by. So this is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I'd heard so much about this book. I think I might have first heard about it on Jen Campbell's channel, and since then I've heard about it lots of other places, and I've thought to myself, that is a book for me. This is a book about a family who go on a break, on a holiday, and the holiday house they have is very luxurious and out in the middle of nowhere, basically. And a couple of nights into their holiday, a couple arrive on their doorstep in the middle of the night. This couple tell them that it's their house that they are renting out, and they need to stay there because something has happened in the wider world, and in New York in particular. And this book then deals with the two families, I suppose, trying to live together, work out what has happened, and more things ensue, basically. I did think this was a good book in a way, but the style of writing in this is very unusual for me, and my main problem with this book was that the characters were quite unlikable. I didn't really like the family group at all. The daughter was okay, the son was okay, the parents were pretty repulsive, especially the mother. Yeah, they just didn't seem like very nice people. I didn't mind the couple who turned up, they were quite interesting. There was a lot less apocalypse in this than I thought there would be, but I quite enjoyed the sort of fear of what might be going on out in the world, and a couple of things that happen that were very, very strange. I quite enjoyed that. I think once you break through the style of writing of this, it is an interesting book, but it just didn't live up to what I thought it was going to be at all, unfortunately. So it was good, but it didn't really grip me that much, unfortunately. Secondly, in my good category is Anne of Ingleside by L.M. Montgomery. I read this for the Readalong, being hosted by Emily at Novell Novels, and you'll know that every month I've been talking about a different Anne of Green Gables book because we've been reading one per month. I enjoyed it more than the last book, Anne's House of Dreams, and I probably also enjoyed it more than the one before that as well. This was probably my favourite since Anne of Avonlea, but it doesn't match up to Anne of Avonlea, and it doesn't match up to Anne of Green Gables, the original. At this point in the series, it's important to note that Anne is grown up and a mother, and this book largely deals with her children. And what I think is really, really good about L.M. Montgomery is her ability to write about children and their adventures. She doesn't always hit the mark on the adults and their adventures, and I still feel like Anne is now a bit of a bystander in her own story. There were a couple of bits with Anne and her husband and their relationship, but not enough for me. I would have liked more, but I did enjoy following each of the children in different parts of the story. That was good. And again, I say this every month, but L.M. Montgomery writes just amazingly, beautifully about nature. So yeah, I'm getting close to the end of this series now. I haven't enjoyed them all as much as the first couple, but this one was a good entry in the series. Moving into my very good category, the first book to mention was a library book, and that was a poetry book, 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver. This was my first experience of reading Mary Oliver's poetry, and I've been repeatedly recommended it by people who said if I liked nature writing and I liked poetry about nature, I would love Oliver. And I really did. I thought it was a lovely collection, really, really nice poems about the natural world, basically. So yeah, there were some nice poems about dogs. There were some lovely poems about the natural world. I would highly recommend it if you like nature poetry. Also, my reread would go into the very good category of Sleeping Murder by Agatha Christie. I've already talked about this extensively in my mid-month update, so I will not talk more about it here, but this is a great entry in the Miss Marple series, and in fact is my favourite of the lot. I also read, which I would categorise as very good, I didn't read this whole collected works of Oscar Wilde, but I did read 4 plays from this as a buddy read. Emily from Novell Novels read this with me, and she had a collection that included 4 plays: Lady Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, and The Importance of Being Earnest. So we read those 4 together, and this was very good overall. So I really, really enjoyed the play Lady Windermere's Fan. It was very funny. I thought that A Woman of No Importance was not particularly a favourite for me, but it was good, and I liked the twist in it, and I didn't love An Ideal Husband. I thought that one went on a bit too long and was not really my cup of tea at all, but the whole collection redeemed itself massively with The Importance of Being Earnest. This was the first time I've ever read this very famous play, and it's definitely a favourite. It was so funny, so hilarious. I love Oscar Wilde's writing, and I love the way he makes use of misunderstandings and connections, and just the humour, particularly in that play, is just so brilliant. I think that I would love to see that performed as a play because it would be wonderful. So I've put this into my very good category because the first and the last play were really, really excellent. I loved Lady Windermere's Fan, and I really loved The Importance of Being Earnest. It's definitely my favourite thing that I've read by Oscar Wilde, which includes The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I really did love too. And the last book in my very good category is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. I read this for a project that I've had going on for a little while, where I am trying to read some books from a certain list, and all will be revealed about that later. I thought that this was a really good book. It's written in second person, which I found a little bit difficult to get into at first. And this is a really powerful story about, it's not really a love story. It is a bit boy meets girl, but it's also not really about that at all. So it is about this particular relationship between the protagonist who we're following and a woman that he meets. So it is a love story, but it's also very much about the protagonist's experiences as a black man in London. I think this has a lot of really interesting things to say. I found it very moving. I thought this was much more sort of introspective than I was expecting, but I really liked it overall. I just didn't, it wouldn't be an absolute top favourite for me, because I felt that the style of writing distanced me from it a little bit, and at the beginning I struggled a little bit to get into that perspective, but I think that this has really important things to say, and it was a perspective that I've not read a lot from. I really found it fascinating to read this perspective, and I would highly recommend picking up this book because it's very short, but it's very powerful. Moving on into my favourites of the month. My second favourite book of the month was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, who I really think has a very good chance of being a new favourite author. I've already talked about this one elsewhere. It's a really good book. Really enjoyed the read of this, but the sort of dystopian element in this is very subtle, but I like that. And I would definitely revisit this book again. I will definitely watch the film of the same name to see how they got on with adapting this. So yeah, this was in my favourites of the month. And my final favourite of the month was Julia and the Shark by Kieran Millwood Hargrave with Tom de Freston. I read this right at the end of the month, and this is a wonderful book. This is a one sitting sort of book. I didn't quite read it in one sitting, but I did read it in a day, and I just absolutely loved it. So this is the story of Julia, who with her mum and dad goes to live in a lighthouse on one of the far-flung islands in the Scottish Highlands, and it's about her mother, who is I believe a marine biologist or similar, and is looking for a really special type of shark. I can't remember the name of the shark now, but she's looking for a shark and believes that the shark will have the key to some medical advancements. This is told from Julia's point of view as she watches her father is fixing the lighthouse for his job, her mother going out in search of this shark, and it's also about Julia trying to make friends up in Scotland, and some problems that her friends have as well. And the illustrations in this by Tom de Freston are just absolutely stunning. Many of them feature birds and many of them feature like the shark shape, but they are just so beautiful. Just absolutely stunning pictures with the yellow standing out on these so much each time. It's just absolutely stunning. I would urge people to get a copy for both the brilliant storyline and the stunning illustrations. Yeah, I highly recommend this one. I'm pretty sure this is middle grade, but I really loved it anyway. I thought there was a very good portrayal of mental illness in this book as well. I thought the whole thing was so well done. Fantastic book. I will definitely revisit this again. Thanks Jack over at Spread Book Joy for recommending this one, because it was just as wonderful as you said it was, and now I can finally watch your full review because I have read it. We've reached the point of the video where we need to talk about the giant TBR. And I've been promising you an update for some time. So the giant TBR at the end of last month stood at 180 books. I then had an unhaul of 6 books, and this month I read 4 books from the giant TBR, which was Julia and the Shark, Never Let Me Go, Anne of Ingleside and Don Quixote. So that takes 10 off the giant TBR and we would have been down to 170. But if you've been watching my videos lately, you'll know that that isn't the case because I've had 2 hauls. So I hauled 5 books in London and I hauled 14 books for my birthday that are adding to the giant TBR. So that's a total of 19 hauled, which means that the TBR goes back up from 170 to 189. So my book hauls have undone a lot of progress, I'm not going to lie. 189 seems like a huge amount of books again, but at least the TBR didn't go back up to 200, so that's good. And I'll just have to get reading in the second half of the year and hope we can get the TBR back down and under control. It would be nice to think I could get it back to 170 again. And of course, my target for this year was to get it down to 150. So I'm going to have to really do some reading from my shelves to get that done. That's all for my wrap up today. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about all the books I read and didn't finish in June. And please do leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you read in June. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will look forward to seeing you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now. I've finished!